Hey guys, it's Matt Zudweg here, experimenting with a new camera setup here, so figured I'd tie a sculpin pattern and see how this turns out. So I have my H&H tube fly adapter here, which also works really good for cotter pins. This is just a 1-inch long cotter pin. I buy them in a box of like 100 from Tractor Supply. And this is the normal setup I use for any of my swung fly patterns, and it works really nice. So you can see I have it in there clamped down like that. And for thread, I have the Vivus 100 denier black. I really like the Vivus 100 denier because it's really hard to break and works really good for deer hair heads, which is what I'm going to put on this one. So I've got that wrapped on there. I'm just a little ways behind the eyes, and I'm going to put on some bead chain eyes here. I just have 4 bead chain eyes. I'm going to tie those in on top of my cotter pin. Get those nice and solid. Oops. About like that. And then I'm going to flip this whole thing upside down, because if the bead chain is on the bottom, it will help the fly to ride the right way. And I just moved my cotter pin up, so there's just a little teeny bit behind this loop that holds it in. And now I'm going to put some 30-pound fire line on there. I have a little spool of it attached to my post on my vise, which works really good. And I use a cautery to burn through the line instead of scissors to cut it. I'm going to make just a loop of the fire line. This is 30 pound, and I'm going to go through the eyes of my cotter pin and get the loop about the length I want it. This is a pretty big fly. I'm going to go a solid inch longer than I normally would. Normally I kind of use this hump right here as a gauge on how long to make my loop, but in this case I'm going to go another inch beyond that because this is a longer fly, being a sculpin pattern. So I'm going to get that tied in on top. I'm just going to go right back here as far as I can, come back forward a little bit, and I'm going to take this and go underneath those bead chain eyes, these tag ends. And I'm going to tie that in a couple cross wraps on top of the eyes, and then a couple wraps in front. So this is super solid. This is pretty much the setup I use for about every swung fly pattern I tie. There are some variations, but this is pretty much it. And I'm going to go back behind the eyes again. I'm going to take some variegated bunny strip in olive. I'm going to tie that on top behind the eyes. And I'm going to cut that off about even with the loop. About like so. And at this point, I'm going to grab a dyed mallard flank. These are olive. Cut open the package and get one of these great big select feathers out. And I'm going to strip the stem of it back like that to create a nice tie-in spot. And then I'm going to fold all of these feathers back like so. And now I have my tip like that. I'm just going to clip that off short, tie that in so the cupped side is facing away from me. And now I'm going to grab some olive ice stub. This is a super simple sculpin pattern, but works really good. I used sculpin patterns exclusively for the first few years that I ran swung fly trips. It wasn't until we had a couple tough years that I switched to experimenting with other stuff. But I'm just palmering this mallard flank forward through that olive ice dub. The ice dub kind of acts as a nice pillow and helps those fibers to splay out really nice and keep the stem from breaking. So I'm going to tie that off, a couple loops in front, clip off the stem, throw that away, get that lash down really good, and then I'm going to go up here in front of the eyes, just do a cross wrap just to tie everything in good, but that's what I have so far. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of flash to this one, not much. I'm going to grab a couple strands of olive crystal flash, and I'm going to go in front of the eyes, and then about the same amount on both sides, tie it in like that. So that kind of gives me a nice even layer of flash on top of the fly by going around each side of it like that. And I'm going to do the same thing with a little bit of yellow holographic, and I'm going to grab a strand or two of orange holographic like that, and then I'm going to do the same thing where I go around both sides here, lash those in a little bit, and then tie those or clip those off so they're about even with the back of the tail. I'm going to go one more layer here. I'm going to grab some holographic dark olive, and I don't know, I probably got a dozen strands right there, and this one I'm going to tie right on the top here. So I'm going to go about on the top like that, lash that down a couple times so it's kind of nice and splayed out through the whole top of the fly. And then I'm going to grab all this excess here, and instead of clipping it off, I'm going to fold it back, cut it so it's about the same length as the other stuff, and then I'm going to fold it back and kind of spread it out across the whole top of the fly here. Lash that down good. Go back in front of the eyes now. I'm going to do just a half hitch just to make sure nothing goes stray there. So that's what we have so far. A little flashy on top. I didn't do any flash underneath. It's all on top on this fly. And now I'm going to grab a Primo deer hair patch here, and I'm going to grab a nice clump for this head. Good, probably a pretty good sized clump of hair here. I'm going to grab all the tips like this, nice and tight, and I'm going to clip this off right down by the hide as close as I can. So I got all those butt sections, and now this is full of under fur. So I got it by the butt sections now. It's full of under fur, so I'm going to grab it nice and tight by the tips again. I'm going to grab my little flea comb here. You can see it has some under fur already in it. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to push this against my shirt here and just comb that out. Comb out all that under fur. About like that. You can see lots of under fur in that stuff. And so I'm still holding it tight by the tips here. And I'm just going to make sure all my tips look fairly close. They don't have to be perfect, but if I want them perfect, I'll just put it in my stacker. In fact, I'll do that for you a second. I don't always do this, but in this case I will. I'll put it in my stacker, stack them all so they're nice and neat. I could really use a bigger hair stacker for all of this stuff. Alright, so they're in my stacker now. Give that a couple pounds. Pull some strays out here. Now if I pull the bottom, you can see they're nice and even. Get these out of here nice and neat if I can. Okay, I'm holding it by the tips really nice and firm. Okay, I got about the length I want there, so I'm going to trim off this excess, or get a little trash can over here to my side. So I'm going to trim those off in there, so I don't got to sweep them up later. Alright, so now you can see I got all my butt sections nice and neat. And what I'm going to do with my thread here, I'm going to spin my bobbin counterclockwise. If I'm looking down at it, it's going counterclockwise, and that's going to help tighten the thread up. It's also going to make my loop so it pushes backwards instead of off the front of the fly. Alright, so that's spun good. I'm going to put these butts so they're all right at the, even with the front of the fly there, the very front of the cotter pin. I'm going to do 2 loose loops around this deer here, and I have it probably a 1/4 inch back behind the butt sections. Alright, got 2 loops there. I'm going to hold this very firmly on top of the fly. Pull that thread down. Before I think it's going to break it, I'm going to do a couple loops in front, just working my way forward towards that eye. And now I can push these all back, kind of flatten this whole head out, flat like a sculpin. Okay, lash that in nice and tight. So that's what we look like now. Got a nice good head that's going to push a lot of water and make all these materials dance around in the water. And I'm going to find my whip finish tool. Give that a little whip finish right there. Usually go 7 or 8 times for a whip finish, and I'm going to do this one twice just to make sure nothing's going to go anywhere. Get that all nice and seated firmly. And for cutting this Vivas thread, instead of cutting it, I just push the scissors into it, and that breaks it really nice. So looking at it from the top, we look like that. And I'm going to trim this head off just a little bit on the bottom. So that's what the bottom looks like. Just a super simple sculpin. I've tied this pattern, not always on cotter pins. I tied them on hooks for years, but this is really, really effective and really works good for getting in those shallow, slow pools where the steelhead like to hang out, especially in the colder water. Thanks for watching, y'all.